quite frequently. There are other countries that are certainly spending billions of dollars on high-speed rail, and their cost per mile of track is much lower than what we have here in California or across the nation. So as we start to compare with other countries, we need to look at how they're doing things not only smarter but less expensive. In California, we have the CEQA environmental law, which is much greater than NEPA. Why do them both? If the President and the administration's commitment is to do high-speed rail in California, wouldn't we waive some of the high cost of the environmental process that we have seen the federal government waive in the past for other priority projects? So those are going to be some things that I'll be looking at as we take a look at the investment of our taxpayer dollar. And then finally, we've been hearing about shovel-ready jobs for quite some time now. The stimulus package was passed in 2008, and yet in 2011, going into 2012, we still do not have one shovel in the ground. To me, a shovel-ready project means if you're going to go out and ask taxpayers to spend money on a shovel-ready project, that means it's ready to put a shovel in the ground. 3 years later, going on 4 years now, still no shovel and no plan on putting a shovel into the ground. I believe that if the high-speed rail project in California is not going to get moving quickly, then that money ought to be diverted to shovel-ready projects that would be committed quickly. Goods movement, people movement, building highways, but letting a pool of money just sit out there, I think, is irresponsible. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. And Oklahoma City. And we're committed to helping the people of California achieve their vision for high-speed rail. This is not Ray LaHood's vision. This is California's vision. This is the people's vision. People that have worked on high-speed rail in California for 15 years. It's not a cheap project, but it's an essential one. Its costs are in line with those of similar projects that have been successful around the world, and we're in it for the long haul. We will not be dissuaded by the naysayers, by the critics, some of whom you're going to hear from later on today. We're not. High-speed rail is in America, coming to America, and expanding in America. There's no going back. The dollars to support all of this were included and paid for in every budget that President Obama has submitted to Congress. All of this was included in the President's outline for a long-term transportation bill which charted a course and proposed funding for the next 6 years. All of this was included in our push for high-speed rail projects as a part of the American Jobs Act. And all of this is anchored in our shared history. We've always met tough challenges by doing big things. We've always done big things. And transportation has always been bipartisan. Always. When I was here, sitting where you're sitting, I was voting for 2 transportation bills. Both of those bills passed with over 400 votes in the House. There are no Republican or Democratic bridges. There are no Republican or Democratic railroads. We've had a rich history in this country of bipartisanship when it comes to transportation, because transportation puts people to work.
You know, why isn't there a focus? I mean, why are you opposed to saying, with all this money, taking the money from maybe even California and focusing on the Northeast Corridor when we own the tracks, when the numbers, the number of people that live in the Northeast Corridor, 18-19% of our population on a 2 or 3% of our land mass, it's absolutely ripe for high-speed rail. So why wouldn't we focus on that like a laser to get it done there, a place that I believe will be highly successful, and we can learn tremendous lessons to take it to these other emerging corridors, especially in these times of very, very short, very small budgets that we have to work with.
Well, we do believe in the Northeast Corridor, but we also believe in America. We believe there are people in other places in America that would like to have a train to ride. We've just invested $1 billion in the Northeast Corridor. We just had the Northeast Corridor designated for rail. We're paying attention to it. Look, when we started this 3 years ago, there were different governors in different states. I don't have to tell all of you that. You know that. There's a new governor in New York. He wants high-speed rail. That didn't exist when we started 3 years ago. There's a new governor in Connecticut. And I've met with these governors. These governors are our partners. We need partners. Amtrak has been a good partner. For all the criticism and how people love to decry Amtrak, Amtrak is making money. Ridership is up. I was on a train to New York City this weekend. from Washington to New York, completely full. From New York to Washington on Sunday, completely full. Ridership is up on Amtrak. We're making investments in Amtrak. They're as good a partner as any state that stepped up and wants to get into the passenger rail business. We are not going to just invest every dollar in one part of the country. That's not fair. It's not fair to people who get elected to this House who have people in their states that want to get in the passenger rail business. It's simply not fair.
You make my case for me. You were on a train from Washington to New York. It was full. Absolutely. That's why we need to focus there.
And it was on time. And they made money.
The train that exists in California between San Francisco and Los Angeles isn't full. I don't believe it, and I don't believe there's enough money in California to ever complete that project. You've got a state that's as close to being bankrupt as you can, and so why don't we... Look, I'm for passenger rail in this country. I'm just not for spending this money on high-speed rail lines that aren't going to be built, that the American people aren't clamoring for. My good friend from West Virginia said there are people in this country that are aching for relief. You know where they're aching for relief? To have passenger rail where we should be spending some of this money? Los Angeles to San Diego. For half of what we're investing in the Central Corridor, they can have significant improvements to move people around. And anybody, Mr. Secretary, I know you've been to Southern California. All you have to do is walk out the front door of your hotel and you see the massive congestion. So why aren't we really focusing on these places that really have tremendous needs? As far as I can tell, from San Francisco to Los Angeles, the roads are not backed up. They're not sitting in tremendous traffic jams. That's occurring in Southern California and Northern California. So I encourage you. Again, I'm in favor of high-speed rail where it makes sense. I'm in favor of improving passenger rail systems. As I say, I use it all the time as an example. I hope you do. I know Mr. Szabo and I have spoken about it. The Keystone Corridor. That's an example of passenger rail. It's not high-speed rail, and people are getting on it. I'm the poster child for railroad passenger rail service. 20 years ago, as you know, my father sat on this committee, and I told him, I'll never get out of my car and ride in a train because I want the freedom, as most Americans do. But today, if I'm going to Philadelphia from Washington or from my district, I go to Harrisburg and get on the train because I don't want to deal with the traffic. And I think American people, when you have frequency and reliability, you don't have to go 150 miles, 180 miles an hour. And it's a lot less expensive to upgrade those, as we're seeing in some of these corridors in the Midwest. I think that's really where our focus should be. And I see my time's expired. One other thing I just want to bring up, not to get a response from you, but there's a procurement issue that's coming up. Mr. Szabo and I have talked about it. This is not the right venue, but I hope to stay engaged with you on a procurement issue. Mr. Szabo shaking his head back there. That it's important to the United States when it comes to purchasing locomotives for some of these different routes around the country. So again, thank you for being here, and I urge you to go back and reevaluate the Northeast Corridor and some of these other corridors that have a desperate need today, and we can be successsul. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yield to the ranking member, Ms. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind, I wouldn't mind.
Did you want to respond? I thought you nodded your head affirmatively, and Mr.
I was not agreeing with him.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Which I will be very
defer.
Which I will be very clear
right
about.
Ahead.
I'm glad you cleared that up,
Look
Secretary.
Mr. Schuster, we don't make this stuff up. The ideas for this map that was included in my testimony today, these corridors, Ray LaHood didn't make this up. These corridors came from people who live in these states who want passenger rail. So if you don't like the idea where a rail line is going in California, then you need to talk to the people in California who have been working on high-speed rail for 15 years, including some members of Congress who have personally come to me and told me where they think there would be a good investment of money, just like the people in the Northwest, just like the people on the Northeast Corridor, just like the people in the Midwest. This is a reflection of what people in America are asking for. It's not a reflection of President Obama sitting down on a map and drawing a line, or Ray LaHood. This came from the people, and the people want this. Irregardless of whether you think they do or not, the people in California want this. People that have been working on it for 15 years. People in Mr. DeFazio's area in the Northwest want this corridor. We didn't make it up. And we're making investments where we think they're good investments, where over time, over a period of time, it took 50 years to build the interstate. We're not going to build high-speed rail overnight. It's going to take some time. We're doing what the people want. And also, elected representatives of the people, by the way.
With all due respect, Mr. Secretary, my daughter wants a brand new Jeep Grand Cherokee luxury SUV. She can't afford it, nor can I afford it. Well, and that's part of the problem in this situation.
I'm glad you didn't think that when you came to me about the Keystone Line, because you thought it was a good idea, and we thought it was a good idea, and we found the money to make the investments. And that's what we're doing for other representatives in Congress.
You're absolutely right where it makes sense. I'm not coming to you asking you to invest in high-speed rail from Harrisburg to Pittsburgh. And that goes right through my district. And I haven't done that. Where it makes sense, I support it. Where it doesn't make sense, again, I think we're wasting our money, and we should be focused on areas where we can see tremendous success stories that are out there. We'll be able to see that. Mr. Denham, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, again, thank you. I'm looking forward to getting the plan on how this money is going to be invested. I would ask that you submit that to us before next week's hearing, which is specifically on California high-speed rail. On the overall picture of transportation funding, you had said something that I found interesting. I'm a freshman here. This is my first year, my first transportation bill. I do believe that Congress should have a set of priorities, and certainly Congress should have a pool of money for our transportation projects. I do believe that improving our infrastructure can create American jobs. But you had mentioned Congress presenting that, coming up with the presentation. I would assume, just like in California when I served in the state Senate, the governor comes up with his proposal on priorities, that the administration would come up with a list of priorities on what you think the transportation projects should be across the nation, and how money should be best spent, as well as where the revenue for that would come from. Do you have a plan on the overall transportation project?
Yes, sir. I'll be happy to share it with you. It's a $550 billion plan that the President has put forth. It's a comprehensive transportation program, and we'll be happy to share it with you.
Thank you. And the pay-for on that?
The pay-fors will be included.
So there is a revenue stream?
Absolutely.
Do you
if you want to get into great detail, I think it would be better if I'll share it with you, and then if you want me to come and visit with you about it, I'll be happy to do it.
I would love to see it. I'd love to. I'd welcome the meeting. Can you give me just an example of the broader aspects? Are we? I don't need to go line by line on the revenue, but I'd like to at least get a good understanding of whether or not
use of the Highway Trust Fund, which has been diminished over the years, but is set aside for the use of transportation. It's the way we've always paid for it. And then there are some other provisions in there, and I don't have them at my fingertips, but I'll be happy to share them with you.
How much is in the trust fund currently?
How much is the trust fund? Well, look, it fluctuates. I mean, I don't have the figure today. I'll get it. I'll put it on the record for you. I'm sure one of those smart staff people up there knows exactly what the figure is.
He says 220. So ballpark, where does the other 330 come from?
I'll be happy to share the revenue part of it with you, as well as the plan. Look, if I say something here on the record and it's not quite accurate, somebody's going to point that out. I'll share it with you so I get it accurate.
Okay, but are we looking at, I mean, that's a big number. Are we looking at bonding, tax increases?
You asked me if the President has a plan. The answer is yes. Does he have the revenue to pay for it? The answer is yes, and I'll be happy to share it with you. Actually, the committee has it. I mean, we've submitted it.
I appreciate the gentleman's questions. And again, we're going to have a hearing on California next week. I don't know what day it is next week, but we're going to have a hearing. And so we certainly would look forward to making sure we have it. Staff has it. I don't know for sure, but we'd like to have it in our hands before next Thursday is that hearing.
3 quick questions for you and 1 comment to my colleagues. First of all, I just want to remind everyone that all roads to glory always lead west. So we appreciate your efforts, and I thank Ms. Edwards for at least allowing California to stay on the map.
Well, generated yield, did you mean western Pennsylvania?
No, sir. I meant the real west where the gold was found and you know, the shores of California. But my 3 questions are very brief. First of all, sir, my question is, I know Mr. Denham, I had an opportunity to participate in a hearing with transportation with Mr. Mica, and Initially in our proposal in California, it started off that the segment would be in the Central Valley. There's obviously been multiple discussions, and it's my understanding that any future proposals have to include the Central Valley. Are you still, committed that it has to be the Central Valley, or is there openness to other potential routes?
It's the Central Valley, and again, this is not stuff we make up. We go to the stakeholders that have been involved in these projects for 15 years, and we take our cues from them. But we also have made investments in, we made a $450 million investment in Trans Bay. That's not in the Central Valley, by the way. It's at the other end. It's at the start. So the idea that this is kind of a dead-end thing in California is not accurate. We made a $500 million investment in Trans Bay, which is in San Francisco, in downtown San Francisco, which is one of the demarcation points for the high-speed rail. Everything's not in the Central Valley, but we're in the Central Valley. We've made a commitment there. That's where people want us to be, and so until somebody tells us differently or they have a different plan, that's where we're going to be.
Okay.